Welcome to the UConn Residential Life Contract Release Process tutorial. This tutorial was designed to assist students in determining whether or not a contract release is appropriate for them to submit, and if it is deemed appropriate to submit, how to best complete the contract release process. Through this tutorial, we will discuss the purpose of a contract release. We will also discuss the contract release form, which, before you continue any further, should be reviewed in advance of watching this tutorial, as a number of topics listed on the contract release form will not be discussed through this tutorial. Then we will discuss points to consider when submitting a contract release for one of the four following reasons: medical, financial, change of status, or other. Next, we will discuss the overview of the process and timeline of submitting a contract release through receiving a decision from the committee. Next, we will discuss the contract release review committee and their role in reviewing and making determinations upon requests. Finally, we will share information about contacting Residential Life with additional questions upon completion of this tutorial. What is a contract release? The contract release is a process that UConn's Residential Life is proud to offer to students facing a substantial change in circumstances from the time their contract went into effect and that impacts a student's ability to live on campus. The contract release process is a serious process and will adhere closely to our written policy. It should be noted that a small number of students are granted a contract release each year. We will need to collect all relevant documentation from submitting students to confirm the reason for returning a student's contractually obligated funds. We will be collecting these documents and retaining them for the purposes of auditing. As a reminder, the $300 room reservation fee, whether paid or not, for continuing students is non-refundable and will not be included in any billing adjustments made as a result of an approved contract release. When a student is ready to submit a contract release request, all documentation can be submitted electronically, which is our preferred format, to livingoncampus@uconn.edu, and this email can be given a subject of contract release request. Additionally, documents can be submitted in hard copy to the Residential Life office in Whitney Hall during business hours. Please tell the student staff at the front desk to provide your documentation to the contract release coordinator so that we can review your request as quickly as possible. Now we will discuss the contract release form. This form is available on the Residential Life webpage in PDF format and can be filled in electronically and saved with your text. As a reminder, the contract release form should be reviewed in advance of progressing further into this tutorial. When downloading and utilizing the contract release form, it is important to download the form, save it to your computer, and then fill it out. If you fill it out on the website and then try to save it, you will often lose the content of your submission. It should be noted that a student will complete and submit the third page of the contract release form. All students must fill in their personal information at the top of this page, check the box that they have reviewed and understand the content of this tutorial. Students will fill in the narrative section, which is very important for the contract release review committee to best understand a student's situation. This should be filled out in both a clear and concise manner. The narrative box will also provide a scroll bar to accommodate text beyond the size of the box, so there is not a limit on the amount of text that can be submitted here, but again, please be as concrete and concise as possible. Finally, students will sign and date the bottom of the form as noted. For a financial request, students will complete the two tables in the lower section of the form, which we will discuss further into this tutorial. Next, we will discuss making a medical release request. Generally, medical requests are made for a medical condition of a student or family member. Medical documentation from a licensed physician should be addressed to UConn Residential Life, should include the name of the student and the student's identification number, should include a short explanation of the medical condition relevant to the release, should include an explanation of what the medical condition requires that the student have in their housing assignment. This is very important because often medical practitioners will state that simply that a student should not live on campus. This is not sufficient in our ability to determine whether or not a student should reside on campus based on a medical condition. So this specificity is very crucial to your request. Next, it should include the date that this medical condition was identified. This should include the month, date, and year. And finally, it should include the physician's signature and date on the practice's letterhead. Next, we would like to note that in the narrative section, if you have been working with the Center for Students with Disabilities, or CSD at UConn, related to the medical condition in the past, you should note this so that we are able to consult with them on your request. Next, it's important to note that any additional documentation may include things like a brief letter from an identified family member, and they should be identified in the narrative section to explain the relationship of that person to the student, or anything else that you feel will be useful for the Contract Release Review Committee. Next, we will discuss financial release requests. Generally, these requests are made for a student or a student's family that is facing financial hardship. It should be noted that signing a lease off campus will not be considered as part of a student's financial hardship. Documentation submitted for a financial request can include a letter from a family member. These letters should be addressed to UConn Residential Life, should identify the relationship of the person writing the letter to the student making the request, should include the name of the student and the student's identification number, should include a short explanation of the financial condition relevant to the release, including the date the financial change occurred and the resulting change in financial support that can be given to the student for their UConn costs. For example, a family member might state that before a change in circumstances they were able to provide $10,000 to a student per semester, and now they are only able to submit $5,000 per semester. This letter may include details about where the student will live off campus and related costs. For example, if a student will be living at home with family members, it should be stated whether or not the student will be charged for rent and food, and if so, how much per semester that will be. Finally, these letters should be signed and dated by the person submitting the letter. Please note in the narrative section if you have worked with financial aid to determine alternative financial resources, as we will work closely with financial aid staff to determine whether or not living on campus is financially viable for you. Additional documentation for a financial request may include anything that shows the prior financial situation and the resulting financial situation after the change in circumstances. See the contract release form for more examples. Please also redact any private information like social security numbers from any documentation that is submitted. The committee primarily needs to see the name of the student or the family member's name on documentation, and no other private information is needed. If the documentation contains irrelevant items to the request, for example, if someone were to submit a bank statement, we would not necessarily need to see each individual purchase made, but rather the total of the amount of savings. We would ask that you highlight or draw the committee's attention to the relevant information. This can be done by writing specifically on that document or by noting it in your narrative. All students submitting a release for financial reasons should complete the pictured section of the contract release form on page 3. It is critical for the committee that this section is filled out accurately and that all amounts are in per semester totals. We will first review the table on the left titled Expenses per Semester. There are two columns, one for the on-campus costs and one for the off-campus costs. The tuition row will generally remain the same for students living on and off campus unless a student has reduced their course load. The room cost row should be based off the housing room rate that can be found on the Residential Life website, and for off-campus costs, this should be based upon review of available housing options off campus. The board and food row should include the costs related to the meal plan, if applicable, and the totals can be determined by contacting dining services. The off-campus food costs should be based on an estimation of the amount needed to buy food for the student for one semester. The other row is most often used for utilities related to living off campus and the cost of transportation to commute to campus. Students should also explain where they plan to live off campus if they are released from their contract, and the associated costs in the narrative section of the contract release form so that the contract release committee is fully able to understand the totals noted in this section. Next, we will review the table on the right, which is titled Student Financial Resources per Semester. There are two columns here again. The first column, titled Present, is used to represent the financial resources available to the student before their circumstances changed. The second column, titled Projected, is to be filled out to show the student's financial resources after their circumstances changed. The earnings row is intended for students' earnings and not supporting family member earnings. It is helpful to note in the narrative section where these earnings are coming from. For example, a job on campus, and the number of hours worked per semester. The parent-family contribution row is where a parent-family member's contribution to the student's financial costs at UConn should be noted. For example, if a parent or family contribution is being reduced as a result of a change, i.e. the loss of employment, the committee would expect to see this noted here in the narrative section and in a supporting letter. The savings row can be used to share the amount of personal non-family savings a student has and should be supported with additional documentation. The financial aid row, which includes all forms of financial aid, should show a difference between the present and projected columns if a student's financial aid package has changed. Finally, the other row can be utilized for anything not encompassed in the topics above and should be specifically stated in the narrative section so the committee understands what this row is being used for. Please also see additional information on the contract release form in regard to how the information presented in this section by the submitting student will be utilized by the review committee. Next, we will discuss students making a request for change in status. Generally, these are made by students who have changed from full-time status to part-time status. Supporting documentation generally includes a letter from an academic advisor. This can be submitted in hard copy or, preferably, can be sent from the advisor's UConn email account to livingoncampus@uconn.edu. The letter or email should include the name of the student and the student's identification number. The advisor should note that they are the requesting student's advisor. It should include a short explanation of why the student changed their status to part-time and the date when this decision was made. Finally, if submitted in hard copy, it should include a signature and date, or if in email, the signature in the email will suffice. Additional documentation may include a screenshot of the student's current academic schedule or other relevant documentation. Next, we will discuss students making a request that does not fit under the medical, financial, or other change in status categories, which are the categories most often utilized when students make a contract release request. As such, a clearly written narrative statement will need to be written to explain what substantial change in circumstances has occurred, how this change impacts your ability to live on campus, and the date of this change. Additional documentation will include anything that a student determines will provide their need to live off campus per the notes above. Now we will discuss the timeline and process of submitting a contract release request. When submitting your request, please submit the form and all accompanying documentation at the same time. Once a completed request, including supporting documentation, is received, the Contract Release Committee will review and make a decision within 2 weeks. As such, if you will not be submitting your request in one submission, please inform the Contract Release Coordinator immediately to ensure we do not review your request before it is complete. The contract release decision will be sent to a student's UConn email account and will include the specific decision made by the committee, steps going forward for the student, which will include things like how to cancel your housing given the decision, information about a billing adjustment, if relevant, and the appeal process if needed. Now we will discuss the Contract Release Review Committee. The Contract Release Committee is comprised of staff from Residential Life, the Center for Students with Disabilities, or CSD, who assists with medical requests, and Financial Aid, who assists with financial requests. The committee will carefully review the request form and accompanying documentation based on each staff member's professional position at UConn. The committee, in making their decision, will primarily work to answer the 2 questions listed below. As such, it is important that all requests assist the committee in answering these questions. First, did the student's circumstances substantially change from when their contract went into effect? If yes, how, and does this provided documentation verify this change? Second, could the student uphold their contract with UConn through a room change or utilization of campus resources? In conclusion, it is important to carefully follow the information provided on the contract release form and within this tutorial when preparing your request. Students are only provided one opportunity to make a request. As such, attention to these details that we have provided will ensure the best possible submission. If, After reviewing this information, you have remaining questions, please contact the Residential Life Office and address your correspondence to the Contract Release Coordinator through the livingoncampus@uconn.edu email account or by calling 860-486-2926. Thank you for your time, and we look